For the first time in what feels like forever, you can take a powerful Nvidia graphics card, plug it into a brand new Apple Silicon Mac, and it just works. Now get this isn't some messy workaround or a super complicated hack. We're talking about a real, direct connection that's only possible because of a brand new driver. And the craziest part, this is something two of the biggest companies in the world just wouldn't do. And the story of how a small community actually pulled it off, well, it's even more amazing than the tech itself.
Okay, let's really dive into this, because this whole story is about a small group of people achieving something that seemed impossible. The fix we're talking about didn't come from Apple, a company worth trillions, and it didn't come from Nvidia, another trillion-dollar beast in the world of graphics and AI. Nope, it came from a small, passionate, open-source project. I mean, this is a true David versus Goliath story for our time, where a few dedicated developers did something that two of the most powerful corporations on the planet couldn't, or just wouldn't do, for 7 very long years. You know, to really get why this is such a huge deal, we have to go back and understand the history here. This isn't just about a cool new piece of software. It's about finally ending this long, frustrating period where things just didn't work together. A period that affected millions of professionals, artists, and scientists who love using Macs. It was basically a corporate fight that created a huge technological desert for users.
So this timeline really shows you the Cold War that was happening in the tech world. It all kicked off around 2018 when Apple and Nvidia had this big disagreement. The real reasons, well, they're kind of a corporate secret, but the result was crystal clear. By 2019, when macOS Mojave came out, Apple officially pulled the plug. All support for Nvidia's graphics cards was just gone. This started what everyone calls the 7 years in the desert. For users, this meant if your entire job depended on the incredible power of Nvidia GPUs, you were basically stranded. Imagine you're a 3D artist or a video editor cutting 8K film, or a researcher running complex simulations. All of a sudden, the #1 tool for your job is totally incompatible with your computer. You couldn't buy new hardware, you couldn't get updates, you had to choose between leaving the Mac platform you loved or sticking with old, unsupported gear. And that was the reality, until today, where this community project has finally built a bridge to get us across that desert. Okay, so here's the most important part. This whole problem was way bigger than just gaming or fancy graphics. The single biggest loss in this corporate spot was access to the CUDA platform on Macs. Now, if you've never heard of CUDA, let's break it down, because this is the key to everything. Think of CUDA as a secret, special language that only Nvidia GPUs can speak. And this language is amazing at one specific thing: parallel processing. Now that sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. Imagine you have to draw a picture with a million different colored dots. If you did it one dot at a time, it would take ages, right? Well, a GPU that understands CUDA can basically hire a million tiny artists, give each one a single color and a single spot, and tell them all to draw their dot at the exact same time. Poof! The job is done almost instantly. That's the magic of parallel processing, and it's what powers almost all modern artificial intelligence, machine learning, and scientific research. By cutting off Nvidia, Apple also cut off CUDA, which was like telling the entire community of Mac-based AI developers that the most important tool they had was now off limits. It was a massive blow that forced a lot of pros to just give up on using Macs for their work. So, after 7 years of this tech drought, this is where our heroes enter the picture. A small company called Tiny Corp, led by the famous developer George Hotz, decided to do something absolutely wild. They didn't try to patch an old piece of software or figure out some messy workaround. They looked at this huge problem and said, you know what? We're just going to build a brand new modern Nvidia driver for macOS, completely from the ground up. So what in the world is this tiny GPU that they built? Let's unpack this definition nice and slow, because every part of it is important. First off, it's a kernel extension. The kernel is like the absolute core of your Mac's operating system. It's the central brain that manages everything. A kernel extension is basically a piece of software that plugs directly into that brain to teach it a new trick. In this case, the new trick is learning to speak the language of Nvidia GPUs. It's like a universal translator. Since your Mac doesn't naturally speak Nvidia, this extension listens to the Mac, translates its request for the Nvidia card, and then translates the card's answers back into a language the Mac can understand. And because it's open source, it means the code is public. Anyone can look at it, learn from it, and even help make it better. It's like showing your work in math class, but for programming.
And this really shows you just how clean and, well, elegant this solution is. Before this, to get an Nvidia card working, you had to use these super clunky methods, like setting up a virtual machine. That basically meant running a whole separate computer with a Linux operating system inside a little window on your Mac. It was slow, it was inefficient, it ate up tons of your computer's power, all just to talk to the graphics card. This new way just sweeps all of that mess away. You don't need any official software from Nvidia. You don't need to run a whole other computer inside your computer. It creates this direct, clean connection. You plug the card into your Mac's Thunderbolt port, give the new software permission, and it just works. It's like the Mac suddenly recognizes the GPU as a long-lost friend.
Now, when you hear technical stuff like kernel extensions and command line scripts, it can sound pretty intimidating, right? Especially if you're not a coder. You might be thinking, okay, this sounds amazing, but it's probably a total nightmare for a normal person to actually install. But here's the unbelievable part. According to the people who've done it, the entire setup takes less than 5 minutes, from plugging it in to having it running. So let's just walk through exactly how it's done step by step.
Okay, let's walk through this together. Step 1, the physical stuff. You get what's called an eGPU enclosure. It's just a little box that gives the graphics card power and a Thunderbolt port, and you pop your Nvidia card inside. Then you just plug that box into your Mac. That's it, hardware is done. Step 2 is the one that sounds scary. Run a command line script, but trust me, it's not. All you do is open the terminal app that's already on your Mac, go to the TinyGrad website, copy one single line of text, paste it into the terminal, and hit enter. That one command does all the heavy lifting for you, downloading and setting everything up. Step 3, install a free app called Docker Desktop. You don't even have to know what it does. It just runs quietly in the background and takes care of some complicated stuff automatically. And finally, step 4, you just open your Mac's system settings. There'll be a little notification waiting for you asking if you want to allow the new Tiny GPU software. You click allow, restart your Mac, and you're done. That's it, 4 easy steps, and your Mac is now talking to an Nvidia GPU.
All right, so we've figured out that it works, and it's way easier to set up than you think. But that brings us to the million-dollar question. How good is it? How fast is it? And this is where the story takes a really interesting and honestly pretty confusing turn. Because when you look at the performance tests for running AI models, the results are not at all what you would expect.
Okay, take a close look at these numbers with me. This table shows us something called LLM inference performance. In simple terms, that's just how fast an AI model can generate an answer. Think about when you ask a chatbot a question and it thinks for a second before replying. The speed is measured in tokens per second. You can think of a token as being kind of like a word or part of a word. So the bigger the number, the faster and smarter the AI feels. Now, look at the results. The Mac's own built-in M4 Pro chip is right in the running. But here's the shocker. In some of these tests, it's actually faster than a powerful, separate RTX 5060 Ti graphics card. And it's even hanging in there with the absolute monster of a GPU, the RTX 5090. This just doesn't seem to make any sense. How can the small integrated chip in a laptop possibly keep up with, and sometimes even beat, some of the most powerful external graphics cards you can buy? So this leads us to the most obvious question, the thing everyone thinks of first. Is the cable the problem? In tech, a bottleneck is just something that slows everything else down, like a traffic jam on a superhighway. The immediate assumption is that the Thunderbolt connection, even though it's fast at 40 gigabits per second, is like a narrow country road trying to handle all the traffic from that superhighway. It just can't keep up. But is the cable really the villain here? The answer, at least for this specific job of running an AI model, is a hard no. The cable is not the bottleneck. The real issue is actually the software. Here's why that myth is wrong. Think of it like this. You're a researcher and you need a giant, heavy encyclopedia from the library. The big, slow part is checking out that encyclopedia and carrying it all the way to your desk. That's the AI model being loaded onto the GPU's own memory. That happens one time. Now, once the encyclopedia is at your desk, when someone asks you a question, you just have to look up the answer in the book right in front of you. You don't have to run back and forth to the library every single time. The path back to the library, that's our Thunderbolt table, is barely being used. Only tiny bits of data, like the question and the final answer, travel across the cable. All the real thinking is happening right there at the desk, inside the GPU itself. So if it's not the hardware, what is it? The real bottleneck is the software. And it's all about something called kernel efficiency. Remember our universal translator analogy for the driver? Well, kernel efficiency is basically how good that translator is. The RTX 5090 is an absolute monster. Its own internal memory can move data at a crazy 1.8 terabytes per second. But this brand new driver,
this community project, is only able to use about 33 gigabytes per second of that power. Let's put that in perspective. Imagine you have a supercar that can go 200 miles per hour. But the person driving it is a teenager with a learner's permit on their very first day, and they're too scared to go faster than 4 miles per hour. Is the car slow? Of course not. The car is incredibly fast. The driver just isn't good enough. Yet. That's exactly what's happening. The hardware is a supercar, but the software driver is still learning to drive. And you know the best part? Software can always be updated and improved. This is a problem that can be fixed. Okay, so this all sounds amazing, right? A 7-year-old problem solved by the community, the setup is super easy, and the performance is only going to get better as the software gets smarter. But, and this is a huge but, before you get excited and run out to buy a GPU for your Mac, there is one absolutely critical major catch. This is a limitation you really have to understand, because for a lot of people, this is an instant deal breaker. Here it is. Plain and simple, this solution does not bring back CUDA. Let that just sink in for a second. All of this incredible work, this amazing feat of engineering, it gets an Nvidia GPU running on your Mac, but it does not bring back the industry standard CUDA platform. It does not restore that special language that almost every professional AI tool is built on top of. Someone in the comments on the source video, a user named Lon Lundgren, said it perfectly. He points out that you can't just take your favorite AI tools, like a Llama or Llama CPP, and expect them to work with your shiny new GPU. All of those tools are built to speak CUDA. This new driver, our universal translator, doesn't speak CUDA. It speaks its own unique language, the language of TinyGrad. And what that means is, you are completely dependent on what the TinyGrad community has the time and people to build and support themselves. So what does this actually mean for you, practically speaking? Let's break it down. First, you are totally locked into the TinyGrad system. The best way to think about it is like buying a fancy new Blu-ray player. It's an amazing piece of tech, but it can only play special TinyGrad formatted Blu-rays. It won't play any of your old Blu-rays or DVDs. This means that the huge majority of AI tools that everybody uses every day, they just won't work with this setup. You can only use the specific AI models that the TinyGrad community has carefully converted to work inside their special system. So, while this project is an incredible achievement, it is not a universal fix that brings the entire massive NVIDIA world back to the Mac. Not right now, anyway. Wow, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, a 7-year tech feud, a brilliant community success story, some really weird performance numbers, and one very, very big catch. So let's just slow down for a minute and pull all the threads together. What are the key things you should really take away from all this? First things first, the answer to the big question is yes. After a very long wait, you can finally plug an Nvidia GPU into a modern Mac and make it work. That wall has finally come down. Second, this isn't some super technical process only for hackers. The setup is actually incredibly simple, usually taking just a few minutes, all because of the amazing work from the open source community. Third, when you see those weird performance charts, just remember what's really going on. The current speed isn't limited by the cable or the hardware, it's a software problem, which is actually good news, because it means there's a ton of room for it to get faster. But finally, and this is the most important one for today, you have to remember there is no CUDA support. This locks you into the TinyGrad world and means that for right now, the practical day-to-day usefulness for most people is pretty limited. In the end, there's a quote from the source video that just perfectly captures the heart of this entire thing. $2 trillion companies, Apple and Nvidia, refused to make it happen, and a community project just did it. Just think about that. For almost a decade, two of the most powerful companies in the world let this wall exist between their products, frustrating millions of their own customers. And then a small group of volunteers and tech fans just came along and built a bridge. It's just an amazing example of what can happen with collaboration and open source innovation. And that really leads us to a hopeful place to end. The truly mind-bogglingly difficult work is already done. Writing a kernel driver from scratch, building a compiler, figuring out how to manage memory between two totally different computers. These are huge, huge tasks, but that foundation now exists. It's real, it works, and it's out there for anyone to build on. Everything that happens from here on out is about making it better. It's about optimization. It's about teaching that student driver how to finally handle the supercar. The performance will get better. More things will work with it. The foundation has been laid. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. This whole project is so much more than just a clever bit of code. It's proof of a basic truth about technology. When giant companies decide to build walls that keep people away from the tools they need, passionate communities will always find a way to build bridges. The big question now is what happens next? Will this grassroots effort eventually get so good that it rivals the official software? Or could it even be the thing that finally pushes Apple and Nvidia to start working together again? The bridge has been built, and what gets built on top of it is a story we're all going to be watching very closely.
If you enjoy this video, please like, share, subscribe and hit the bell to the later update from my channel. Thank you for watching till the end and see you in the next video.